The city called itself Chronopolis, although no one born there ever questioned why. Time was not merely kept there, it was traded, hoarded, gambled, inherited, and, when desperation demanded, stolen. Every wrist bore a thin glass dial whose single crimson hand pointed not to noon or midnight, but to the remaining minutes of its owner's life. Wages added minutes, purchases subtracted them, and the soft click when the hand reached zero meant the last transaction had closed. In Chronopolis, poverty was measured in the shallow breaths of those whose dials hovered just above the brink. Wealth gleamed brightest in the thick coils of time the elites wore around their wrists, like intricate bracelets, each coil a surplus of years condensed into an elegant swirl of ruby light. And in the alleyways between marble towers and neon signs, rumors slipped like shadows. Some said a master thief could lift those coils, reroute the minutes, and make the needles of the needy twitch forward once more. Lyra Voith always listened to those rumors. She listened, and she learned. By day she repaired clocks in a small, cluttered shop beneath the elevated tram line, exchanging tiny droplets of oil for the squeal of squeaking gears. By night she climbed drain pipes and slithered across rooftops, her fingers greedy for any unregistered coil she could unclip without detection. She skimmed minutes 3 here, 2 there, never enough to kill her victims, but enough to keep her own dial from slipping under. Yet Lyra did not steal merely to stay alive. She stole for the forest. Verdant wood lay beyond the eastern floodgates, a tangle of ash, oak, and birch that once pulsed with living color. 31 years ago, long before Lyra was born, the Ministry of Hours had attempted a grand experiment. They flooded the forest with harvested surplus, hoping the avalanche of time would ripen every seed instantly, grow timber in an afternoon, and fill the kingdom's empty coffers with lumber overnight. But time, like water, follows secret slopes. It spilled wrong, pooled deep, then froze. The clocks in Verdantwood stopped ticking in mid-stroke. Leaves turned crystalline and hung motionless. Deer stared forever from unmoving eyes. Rivers halted mid-roar, more ice sculpture than stream. The ministry barricaded the forest, blaming miscalculations and vowing research. But the damage seeped outward. Early frosts came to fields that ringed Verdantwood. Harvests failed, and people from the nearby lowlands drifted into Chronopolis, widening its shanty towns. The city's answer was simple: reinforce the time economy. Attach stricter interest rates to every coil. Give the poor fewer and fewer minutes for their labor. Lyra's mother, Isolde, had grown up beside the forest. She told bedtime stories of summers so warm that bees droned lazily between blossoms. We used to measure days by birdsong, she would say, eyes half lost in memory. But one winter the song stopped mid-note. At 9, Lyra dreamed of thawing Verdantwood. At 15, she realized dreams required payment. At 19, already a whisper on the blacklist of the ministry's investigators, she decided to steal minutes, not to hoard but to resurrect. Most thieves coveted portable coils you could slip over a wrist and pawn at any time bureau for clean minutes. Lyra coveted something far harder to reach: the Chronobank, a subterranean vault under the ministry's own headquarters, where the city's unspent overflow lay stacked like wafers of light. A single wafer held a lifetime, 50 years. For 31 frozen years, Verdantwood had devoured lifetimes without digesting them. Lyra suspected it needed one final swallow, one perfectly balanced dose to restart. So she began plotting. First came reconnaissance. She faked janitorial credentials and swept marble floors, absorbing hallway chatter about patrol rotations. Then she accepted a temporary post, repairing the Minister of Hours' personal grandfather clock, which gained exactly 4 seconds each hour. While the minister discussed policy in an adjacent room, Lyra pried open the clock's hollow column, studying the hidden pneumatic tube that ran from his private office to the vault below. One night she left behind a sliver of obsidian mirror no bigger than a fingernail, glued inside the brass coupler. It reflected just enough for her to map the pneumatic mechanism later. Next, she located the single key that mattered, a long, slender glyph carved into the minister's retina. All wafer withdrawals, logged an iris scan. That fact to most thieves spelled impossibility. But Lyra understood clocks, and eyes were simply fluid gears hooked to an optic stem. Hurting the minister's gaze would be tricky, but not impossible, if she carried the right bait. For months she swiped coils from minor bureaucrats, selling half the minutes to finance equipment and stashing the rest beneath the floorboards of her clock shop. When her personal dial crept above 3 whole days, an opulence she had never possessed, she allowed herself a rare indulgence, a glimpse beyond the city walls. One midnight, she cycled out to the barricade around Verdantwood, parking her rust-eaten bike against concrete so old it had sprouted lichen shaped like stars. Through a slit in the barrier she saw it, frozen moonlight on leaves that could not rustle, frost gleaming along antler ridges of statuesque elk. The air near the forest smelled strangely metallic, like cold machinery stalled in motion. She pressed her palm to the barrier and whispered, "Hold on." The forest answered with silence, thick and undisturbed. Yet beneath it she sensed a low hum, as if the halted seconds inside the wood were not dead but trapped, begging direction. That hum followed her back to Chronopolis. It pulsed in her eardrums while she wound springs and counted stolen coils. It became her heartbeat. The night of the heist dawned, an oxymoron suited to Chronopolis, where neon always outshone dawn. Rain glazed the tram cables as Lyra, dressed in a courier's gray, delivered a sealed envelope to the Ministry of Hours. Inside was an invitation printed on counterfeit letterhead. The minister was summoned to a televised charity auction where he would donate a symbolic wafer to demonstrate good faith. The event was fiction, but its lure was real. Publicity. No official turned down free optics. Best of all, cameras would demand that he withdraw the wafer himself, with iris authentication captured live exactly the scenario Lyra needed. In the lobby, she mingled with aides until the minister strode through, flanked by 2 investigators. His ringlets of surplus time chimed faintly like wind bells. He paused at the security gate, displeasure creasing his brow. "No silent auction. Where's the press?" Lyra stepped forward, lowering her cap brim. "Technical delay, sir. The broadcast crew is setting up downstairs for a more dramatic reveal." Irritation warred with vanity. Vanity won. She guided them to the pneumatic elevator that dropped straight into the chronobank. Inside the cylindrical cage, she released a microvial of sleeping vapor from her sleeve. The investigators slumped before they realized they were woozy. The minister staggered, coughing, but Lyra slipped an oxygen patch over her mouth, the same kind watchmakers used while soldering in toxic fumes. Moments before the minister blacked out, she tilted his chin into the iris scanner. The mechanism accepted the retina, and the vault door unfolded like a brass iris of its own. Rows of transparent drawers slid out, each cradling wafers of condensed life. The glow was soft, sunrise trapped inside crystal. She selected 10 wafers 500 years and stacked them in a lead-lined satchel. Her pulse jackhammered. Even a single wafer was more than any thief had dreamed to skim. She reminded herself that this haul was not for sale. As protocol dictated, the system asked for a purpose code, CHAR. With gloved fingers, she entered it, meeting bureaucratic expectations of charitable release. Then she dragged the dozing minister back into the elevator. It rose automatically. Floor by floor, the city's heartbeat grew louder. Exiting the building was simple. Bureaucracy never guards what it already believes accounted for. Outside, dusk laid smudges of lavender along the sky. Lyra mounted her bike. Through muffling drizzle, she heard sirens and trolleys and the distant chime of 1,000 commerce ticks. But none of that mattered once she reached open road. Chronopolis dissolved behind her like a receding tide. Ahead, Verdantwood reared, still and brittle. At the barricade, she cut the padlock with acid wire and shimmied through, pulling the satchel after her. Instant cold kissed her cheeks. Frost bit through leather soles. Yet the wafers in her bag radiated warmth like pocketed summers. She crossed the threshold and time skewed. Her first step took a heartbeat. Her second stretched into a languid yawn of gravity. Around her, the air turned syrupy. She recognized the danger. Every minute she spent inside stasis counted double on her dial, siphoned by the forest's vacuum. Already the hand on her wrist ticked backward faster, measuring not just her life, but Verdant Wood's hunger. "Then feed," she muttered, kneeling at the center of a petrified clearing under a wide-armed oak, arrested mid-whisper. Using a shard of clock-face glass, she carved a shallow trench around the base of the tree. She placed the wafers inside, creating a ring of suspended dawn. When she snapped the satchel shut, darkness rushed in, eager to smother the glow. She drew a deep breath. "Wake." With a flick of her thumbnail, she cracked the nearest wafer. Light erupted, liquid gold coursing through ice veins in the soil. The second wafer shattered. The third. Each burst sent pulses radiating along roots, mapping circuits older than the city. Birds caught mid-flutter twitched. Snow loosened in the tree canopy. Lyra felt the minutes drain from her dial in a torrential leak. 40 years? 30? 21. A hot nausea curled in her gut, but she kept breaking wafers. They dissolved like sugar in rain. Time burned across the clearing in veins of molten silver. The oak groaned as sap unstuck, branches shivering off crystals. Then the sound she had waited half a lifetime to hear. The thud of thawed hooves. An elk shook snow from its crown and blew steam from flared nostrils. Leaves rippled in sudden wind. Somewhere above, a bird finished its clipped note, trilling the phrase it had been forced to abandon 3 decades earlier. Lyra swayed. Her dial showed 7 minutes. A voice sliced the newly moving air. "Quite the miracle. Pity you won't live to enjoy it." She turned slowly. An investigator stood at the edge of the clearing, coat flapping. His arrival puzzled her until she noticed the slender coil around his wrist. Fresh, official, thrumming with confiscated authority, the ministry must have flagged the fake auction and traced her here by following the temporal bleed. Behind him marched 3 soldiers, rifles modified with chronodarts capable of freezing bodily time in segments. The investigator raised one such rifle. "Return the remaining wafers, thief." Lyra glanced at the trench. Only fragments glimmered. She had cracked all but one, nestled intact where roots met earth, pulsing like a heart. "This forest belongs to the state," he continued. "Your sentimental vandalism is an act of terror. Cold terror, maybe," she rasped. Her voice sounded ancient. "You terrorized it first," he advanced. "Put your hands where I can see them." 6 minutes. Leaves rattled above, throwing shadows like broken metronome arms. Lyra flexed stiff fingers. She could run, but not outrun darts. She could fight, but not defeat 4-armed officers while her dial hemorrhaged. Yet she thought of her mother's stories, of bees and birdsong, of children who might one day roam beneath a canopy that moved. She raised her hands slowly, palms outward. "Take me," she said. "But leave the forest. It's awake now." The investigator's eyes flicked toward the oak's shimmering bark. Awe pried a crack in his composure. That pause was all the forest needed. Branches bent, not violently but insistently, showering ice crystals that caught new sunlight slanting between trunks. The glare blinded the soldiers. Wind rose, tugging at coats, whispering in tongues long unsounded. The rifle wavered. An elk bellowed, stomping frost. Startled, one soldier fired. The chronodart ricocheted off a birch that had regained its supple youth, embedding in the investigator's own shoulder. Time congealed around him. He froze, expression unfinished. In that chaos, Lyra staggered to the trench. 5 minutes. She seized the last wafer. A bullet clipped bark above her. Another dart hissed into moss, instantly calcifying a patch of ground. She fumbled for the wafer's edge. If she crushed it wrong, the surge might kill her before it fed the forest. Yet hesitation was a luxury she could no longer afford. 3 minutes. She placed the wafer against the oak's trunk and pressed until she felt it crack like thin ice. Time screamed, an inverted sound, pulling silence through itself. Golden fire ran up the tree, and when it reached the highest branch, the sky itself seemed to yawn awake, clouds scudding backward, then forward, resetting to their rightful drift. The ground bucked, soldiers lost footing. The chronodart's effect on the investigator unraveled. He toppled, coughing. Clocks, long dead, hidden in cottages beyond the barricade, sputtered to life. Somewhere far behind her, Chronopolis's monumental tower chimed a full hour for the first time in decades. Bong! Lyra smiled and collapsed against her root, every muscle spent. Her dial flickered. 1 minute, 40 seconds. Wind stirred her hair, fragrant now with damp soil instead of iron frost. She closed her eyes. If this was her final transaction, it was worth the price. She heard hooves scuff earth near her ear. The elk had approached. Gentle, curious, warm breath brushed her cheek. When she opened her eyes again, she saw not the elk, but her dial, glowing faintly. It displayed not dwindling numbers, but a stillness, no ticking, no drain. Something was wrong, or astonishingly right. She waited for the next click of decrement. It did not come. Above her, the oak's newly freed branches swayed. Gold light retreated into leaves, leaving veins of emerald. Sap dripped onto her arm. Tick, luminous, humming. Where it touched her skin, warmth soaked straight into bone. Her dial's hands spasmed, then spun forward. 10 minutes, 30, 62 hours, a day more. The forest was paying her back. Energy flooded her limbs. She drew a shaky breath and pushed upright. Across the clearing, the investigator writhed, torn between fear and revelation. Soldiers had dropped their rifles, entranced by the sight of a thawed dawn shimmering through budding canopies. Lyra rose, testing legs that felt minted anew. Her dial settled at 23 years, the same number her mother had lost to hunger and unpaid interest before dying. Equilibrium, she thought. The forest does not steal. It trades. Sunlight filtered green and gold. Birds argued in fresh excitement. Streams hidden within the wood trickled again and again, as if experimenting with the concept of flow. For the first time in memory, Verdant Wood exhaled. The investigator struggled to his knees. You ruined the balance, he croaked. No, Lyra said, voice stronger than it had ever been. I restored it. He glared. The ministry will reclaim every second. Tell them to come, she said, gesturing to the living trees, but bring payment. She stepped past him, collected one abandoned rifle and snapped it over her knee. The chronovial cracked, spilling inert gas. Behind her, soldiers did not pursue. They watched leaves swirl like coins in updrafts of freedom, and one by one unclipped coils from their own wrists, slipping them into pockets as if ashamed of once advertising them. Lyra walked deeper into the forest, guided by rushing water and bird song. Hard inside, she found a spring where frost receded in ripples. She knelt, cupped cold water, and drank. It tasted like unscheduled dawns. Days passed. She felt them, but no longer counted. Through the canopy, she glimpsed Chronopolis's skyline. Steam still rose from its chimneys, and neon still buzzed at twilight. Yet a subtle change shimmered over the horizon. Train whistles synced to the new, corrected tower bells. The city's colossal trade board, normally a flicker of subtractions and deposits, now displayed odd pauses where values hesitated, uncertain how to measure the forest's unruly donation. She knew investigators would come, maybe with larger guns, maybe begging. It did not matter. Verdantwood now held an account of its own, accumulating interest in birds, moss, and laughter. In Lyra, the thief who had stolen minutes had become something else, custodian, broker between ticking hearts and beating clocks. One evening she heard footsteps along the newly opened path. A girl of perhaps 12 emerged, eyes bright, coil nearly empty. She stared around, slack-jawed wonder melting fatigue. Lyra understood. Scarcity had driven the child beyond city walls, searching for spare minutes beneath bushes or lost by careless travelers. Lyra unclipped 2 years from her freshly burgeoning dial. She pressed them into the child's trembling palm. Investment, she said. The girl's dial spun forward, and tears sprang. How do I repay you? Grow something, Lyra answered, gesturing to saplings now pushing through thawed mulch. And never sell more than you can afford. With a nod, the child bounded off, pockets jingling with possibility. Lyra watched her go, then turned to the forest. Leaves rustled approval. Clocks far off chimed. Not a countdown, but an invitation. Time at last was no longer currency alone. It had become shared breath, unpriced and immeasurable. Minutes of life still clicked forward, yet now they carried melody like birdsong, unbroken. And in that harmony, the thief found what no stolen coil had ever offered: enough.